Our story begins on Tatooine as Qui Gon Jinn, Padme Amidala, R2-D2 and Jar Jar Binks are off of the Naboo royal ship and looking for parts to repair the hyperdrive. Their journey would take them through Mos Espa, and Qui-Gon noticed a line of posters of famous pod racers. To his surprise, the main poster featured a human male, around 20 years old, and his name was plastered all around the poster. Skywalker was the name. Qui-Gon was intrigued, as pod racing was rarely taken on by humans, but their journey took them into a local junk shop run by a Toydarian named Watto. After some back and forth, Qui-Gon learned that Republic credits and mind tricks will not be working here, so he was forced to move on. There were a few slaves working here, and although it gave Padme and Qui-Gon some unease about the Republic, there wasn't much they could do from here, and as they left the shop, a mysterious hooded man was waiting outside, and he told Qui-Gon that he overheard his conversations. He can fix their hyperdrive for all of those Republic credits, as he uses them and Watto will not. Qui-Gon would take up this man on his offer, and he told Qui-Gon and the others to follow him back to his mother's house, where he may have the spare parts. Qui-Gon asked for his name. The man pulled down his hood, then said his name is Anakin Skywalker. For the last 18 years, Anakin Skywalker has been living on Tatooine, and even with the midichlorians to match any Jedi in the galaxy, he's gone undiscovered this entire time. Anakin's early life was terrible. He grew up a slave, living with his mother, Shmi, who gave birth to Anakin at just 21 years old without a father. Shmi was disgraced by the community for refusing to disclose who the father was, and her life as a slave only continued with young Anakin under the Hutt clan. Anakin grew up, became strong physically and mentally due to the harsh living conditions, and by age 12, he was entering pod races for Watto in order to win Watto money in exchange for the loose freedom of him and Shmi. They couldn't leave the planet, not that they had the money or the ship for it anyways, but their duties were much less rigorous thanks to Anakin competing in the races for Watto. Through the years, Anakin continued to race, and eventually, he got himself a small home just outside of the main city. It was peaceful, and a couple times per week, Anakin would come back into Mos Espa, visit his mother, bring her some food that he'd stolen, making sure Watto was treating her fairly, and this was Anakin's life. Eat, sleep, try to relax, try to be with his mother as often as he can. He never went to any sort of school, but since moving into his own home, Anakin had smuggled himself some holobooks on the history of the galaxy. He learned a lot about the Republic, the Outer Rim, the Jedi, and he wasn't exactly fond of the Jedi. And now, in present day, Anakin Skywalker brought this group to his mother's home, and in exchange for the Republic credits, he would begin working on the hyperdrive. Anakin saw Qui-Gon's lightsaber early on, and he knew this man had to be a Jedi. Anakin's emotions were mixed on this. His research taught him that the Jedi abandoned the Outer Rim years ago. The crime gangs and syndicates were drawing too much attention for them and the Republic, and since their abandonment, clans like the Hutts have grown so much in the Outer Rim while leaving the Republic worlds alone. Anakin knew the Jedi were called peacekeepers, and yet they were essentially a myth to him until today. He had a built-in disdain for the Jedi, thinking they were too good to come out here. But above all, Anakin had some disdain because he knew he was just like them. As Anakin grew up out here, he realized his pod racing skills was more than just instinct. He realized he was wielding this thing called the Force, and in more of his research, Anakin learned it's what gave the Jedi their power. Anakin could sometimes see the future just before it happened. He could sometimes move things without touching them. He had this power, and for all of his life, he's been left on this terrible world. And as Anakin was working on the hyperdrive, R2-D2 met a fully built C-3PO, Jar Jar was stumbling around outside the home, Qui-Gon was talking with Shmi, and Padme was sitting next to Anakin. Qui-Gon asked Shmi about Anakin, and about how he competes in pod racing as a human. Shmi said that she hates it, but Anakin was born to fly, there's no denying it. He has skills and instincts that certainly don't come from her, and there's always been something special about him. Shmi told Qui-Gon that Anakin has also become troubled in life. Growing up the way he did, around the people here, it hasn't exactly shaped him in the best way. Shmi assured Qui-Gon that Anakin is a good man deep down. He is a hard worker, a skilled racer, but there's a part of him that is a great darkness sometimes. He isn't scared to fight people that he perceives as bullies. and it's rare that he will lose. Qui-Gon would soon go out and watch Anakin from a distance as he was rebuilding the hyperdrive. The man had a natural skill with machines. Qui-Gon then raised his eyebrows as Anakin reached out a hand, using the Force to pull a wrench into his hand from a distance. Qui-Gon continued to observe Anakin, and when the hyperdrive was repaired, Qui-Gon would ask him about his use of the Force. Anakin would go on to say that he's familiar with it. It's something he's always felt, but he has no interest in joining the Jedi. He belongs here, helping his mother. Qui-Gon would go on to ask Anakin if he would have interest in just getting tested for midichlorians. Anakin just said whatever, allowing Qui-Gon to perform the test. Skywalker would go inside to wash up, and Qui-Gon sent the blood sample to Obi-Wan, who ran the test and found that this boy has a midichlorian count greater than even Master Yoda. This would prompt Qui-Gon to once more bring up the idea of bringing Anakin to Coruscant to be presented to the Jedi Council. Qui-Gon knew the Council was likely to deny Anakin any training, given his age, but there was just something about him, and that night, Anakin would lie awake, thinking it over. He was not fond of the Jedi, nor the Republic, but the more he thought about it, the more he wanted to give his mother a better life. Qui-Gon and the others were still getting the hyperdrive reinstalled, and late in the night, Anakin would make his decision. He and Shmi were basically free already, as Anakin had given Watto so much with his racing through the years. So, Anakin would agree to go to Coruscant with the group. In the morning, Anakin and Shmi would board the Naboo royal ship with the rest of the group, and Anakin would meet Obi-Wan for the first time. The two of them were quite different, and Obi-Wan honestly wasn't sure what Qui-Gon was seeing in this man, but he went along with it anyway. In hyperspace, Anakin couldn't stop staring out of the window. It was his first time off of the sandy world, a place where he'd built a home and a life, and now he was venturing into a galaxy he'd only read about. Upon arrival, Coruscant was unbelievable. The buildings, the entire thing, was beyond magnificent. So much wealth, all concentrated on one city world, while he lived his life in slavery. It wasn't fair, and now he was part of it all, just because he had this magical power. Shmi would go with Padme to the apartment sector, and with Republic funds provided from Qui-Gon, Shmi would be gifted a nice apartment. Anakin would go to the Jedi Temple. He would find himself standing in a room surrounded by these Jedi. Qui-Gon told them that he believes Anakin to be the chosen one. Anakin wasn't sure what to think of this. Everything was happening so fast. He just stayed quiet, until the Jedi called Mace Windu said that Anakin is far too old to be trained. Yoda and the rest of the council agreed, and they would tell Qui-Gon that Anakin and his mother can keep the apartment, but he cannot be trained as a Jedi. They will not send him back into slavery. He can live here, but not as a Jedi. Qui-Gon was greatly disturbed by this, but he planned to secretly train Anakin if he had to. For now, Anakin would be sent to the apartment with his mother, as Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan had to bring Queen Amidala back to Naboo. And the events on Naboo without Anakin would be altered quite a bit. When they entered the Naboo hangar and confronted Darth Maul, Qui-Gon told Obi-Wan to get into an N1 starfighter and help take down the control ship. Qui-Gon wanted to take Maul alone. There was something inside of Qui-Gon, a voice speaking to him, one that came from a place of darkness. Obi-Wan would take off into the space battle, and Qui-Gon was angry. Angry at the Jedi for refusing to train Anakin, angry that Anakin went undiscovered for so long, angry that the Jedi are so focused on the Senate that they've failed to see the darkness rising in the galaxy, until Qui-Gon was now face to face with a Sith. Anakin being 20 years old and undiscovered with this high midichlorian count, and then denied training. It just made Qui-Gon so frustrated. He would take out all of these emotions in this duel. As he and Darth Maul moved across the plasma bridges, Qui-Gon would use his anger to sever Maul's blade, cutting the Sith apprentice in half. When Maul fell dead over the edge, Qui-Gon fell to his knees, forcing himself to calm down, center himself. These were emotions within himself that he didn't recognize. He was just so frustrated with the Council. This was an opportunity they could not pass up, and so Qui-Gon would take it upon himself to ensure that Anakin is trained. Obi-Wan, a great but reluctant pilot, would return to the hangar with the droids defeated, and he would join Qui-Gon back to Coruscant now that Naboo has been saved. And on Coruscant, Qui-Gon would find Anakin, tell him that the Council is wrong. He must be trained, and he will do it himself. Qui-Gon would inform the Council that he is taking some time away from the Order to just find his own peace, and he would disappear, with Obi-Wan now a Jedi Knight. In reality, Qui-Gon had taken a modest apartment overlooking the city, and from here, he spent every night training the young man that the Council had turned away. Anakin began training as an angry, bitter man. He resented everything that the Republic was representing, and it was all on display here. Wealth for the few, indifference for the rest. Qui-Gon didn't try to suppress that rage quite yet. He tried to redirect it. Their training began simply with just sitting cross-legged on an apartment floor while the hum of traffic below tried to break their focus. For weeks, Qui-Gon taught Anakin just to breathe, to feel the world moving around them. It would infuriate Anakin at first, but over time, something in him would soften. They took it so slowly, and Qui-Gon used Shmi to keep Anakin calm in the face of so much change. By the end of the first year, Qui-Gon brought Anakin down into the Coruscant underworld. There, Anakin learned how to fight with both restraint and with power, protecting people who were in danger from the local gangs. Qui-Gon taught him to use the same survival instincts that had kept him alive and feared by so many on Tatooine, but also to refine them through awareness rather than fury. They broke up gang fights, rescued trafficked workers, dismantled illegal spice rings in silence, leaving no trace of Jedi involvement. Qui-Gon let him use the Force freely, but every time he did, Anakin would feel that pull towards aggression. Sometimes, Qui-Gon would have to physically stop him. He was teaching Anakin to feel his power, without letting it overcome him. But in these missions, Anakin began to feel a joy that he hadn't felt in years. He started fixing droids for the locals, flying speeders in local races in the underworld, laughing as he outflew the seasoned pilots. Qui-Gon watched the boy rediscover joy through helping people and being free. He spent so much time with Anakin and Shmi. He was like a father to Anakin, and soon, he and Shmi were quite close. By the second year, they began taking off-world assignments in secret. Qui-Gon used some old contacts among smugglers and freedom fighters to secure these small missions. They were delivering medicine to colonies, freeing slaves from hot worlds, negotiating with farmers on distant worlds. These trips were awakening a new purpose in Anakin. On one mission to Raxus Prime, he dismantled a slaver ship mid-flight, piloting it through a field of scrap while protecting every innocent aboard, and this would catch the attention of Dooku, as he often visited Raxus. When they landed, Qui-Gon expressed how proud of Anakin he'd become, and that night, Anakin admitted for the first time that he did hate the Jedi when Qui-Gon first arrived, but he can see now that the Jedi can be something better, something for all the people. Qui-Gon smiled. He said he hopes to see a future where Anakin is right, but these days, the Jedi are lost. And during these years of training between Qui-Gon and Anakin, Dooku would also begin rekindling his relationship with Qui-Gon. He would want to learn about this possible chosen one. Dooku found it to be very intriguing, and he would consider telling Darth Sidious about the 20-year-old Jedi who grew up a slave. But soon, Dooku had a better idea. By now, the dark side was flowing through Dooku more than ever. He craved power, and with Anakin, he saw opportunity. He could be the poster boy of the Separatist movement, a Jedi who went undiscovered because the Coruscant Jedi Council refuses to leave their high perch on the wealthy world. The setup was so perfect. Dooku could lead the Separatist movement. Anakin could bring other Jedi into their ranks of darkness. He could be the leader of an army of darkside users, an order that has no limits, unlike these Jedi. It was all set up perfectly for Dooku. All that stood in his way was Darth Sidious and Qui-Gon Jinn. Back on Coruscant, Anakin's power was growing beyond anything Qui-Gon imagined. He was disciplined, intuitive, creative. In his dueling, Anakin was blending experience in street fights with a refined technique that made him unpredictable. Qui-Gon gifted Anakin a lightsaber from the Jedi Temple, along with many spare parts, and Anakin crafted it to his liking. It was blue, and Anakin was an expert with it. And one day, after the 3 years of training, Qui-Gon would say that he's off to Sereno to visit his old friend, Count Dooku. Qui-Gon said he will be back in a day, and he took off. But on Sereno, inside of his castle, Dooku was standing over the dead body of the Sith Lord Darth Sidious. Dooku considered himself to be the best duelist in the galaxy, and he proved it to himself by asking Sidious to come here to tell him about Skywalker, only to betray the Dark Lord. And now, Dooku was luring Qui-Gon here. He was the final tie, keeping Anakin in the light. Around 3 days later, Anakin Skywalker would be trying to contact Qui Gon, but no matter how many times he tried, Qui Gon wasn't answering. He was supposed to be gone for 1 day, 2 at the most, and now Anakin was worried. He didn't know anything about Dooku, the man Qui Gon went to visit, but soon he chose to trust his instincts and go find Qui Gon. He could feel he was in danger, but Anakin knew he couldn't do this alone. Across Coruscant, outside of the Jedi Temple, Obi-Wan Kenobi was meditating by the great tree, eyes closed, when he began hearing whispers in the Force, calling his name. But after a second, Obi-Wan opened one eye, realizing these whispers were not from the Force. Obi-Wan saw someone poking ahead over the near wall. He ran over to see it was Anakin, the man from Tatooine. Obi-Wan asked what in the blazes he was doing here, and Anakin would quickly recap the last 3 years of his life. Obi-Wan was actually not surprised. He knew Qui-Gon well. He should have expected this. And when Anakin asked for help in finding Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan would never be able to say no. So, despite Obi-Wan's instincts telling him to go to the Council with this, he went with Anakin on a mission to find Qui-Gon. Obi-Wan would be able to take a starfighter out of the temple, picking up Anakin, and once in hyperspace, their dynamic didn't exactly blend together. Anakin tried conversing with Obi-Wan about life, about the Jedi, the Republic, food, anything to keep himself distracted. But Obi-Wan just kept saying they must go over their plans, and so they did, again and again. Eventually they would land hard in the forests of Sereno. Rain soaked through their cloaks as they moved through the thick mist and the overgrown vines toward the looming castle. Anakin took point. Obi-Wan followed quietly, muttering about how he'd definitely be expelled for this. When they reached the base of the castle wall, Anakin suggested scaling the side. Obi-Wan pointed out a perfectly functional side entrance, guarded by a sentry. Anakin said they're never going to be able to talk their way in, and Obi-Wan insisted that he would prefer to try. But Anakin was already climbing. Obi-Wan sighed, following Anakin through a side window, and despite the tension, the two started to sync up in their shared mission to find Qui-Gon. But when they reached the main room, a voice called out, telling Anakin to come in. He's been expecting him. Anakin motioned for Obi-Wan to go find Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan did, as Anakin entered the main room to find Dooku waiting with a smile. Dooku introduced himself, telling Anakin that he was born for a reason, to bring peace to the galaxy. Dooku told him that the Republic is rotten at the core, senators trading lives for profit, while the powerless starve and die. The Jedi twisted into lapdogs who answered to politics instead of the Force. But Dooku said they can put together a rebuilt system where planets beyond the core finally had voice and resources, where slavery was hunted down and punished instead of forgotten. He spoke to Anakin personally, calling on his memory of Tatooine. Dooku framed his coming movement as healing, and he framed Anakin as its face, a leader whose name would mean protection to the weak, and those who made people like Anakin slaves would be forced to answer. The words honestly hit Anakin hard. In all of his talks with Qui-Gon, he said nothing could be done yet about this widespread corruption, and here was a man who was offering a real answer. But then, the doors behind them slid open. Obi-Wan ran in with a weak but alive Qui-Gon. Obi-Wan found him being held captive in the basement. As Dooku couldn't bring himself to kill Qui-Gon, he still had wanted Qui-Gon to join him, and was giving him another chance. This was his greatest weak point, and now Qui-Gon was seeing the truth. Dooku had truly become something evil. Qui-Gon told Anakin to step away from Dooku. His promises of power are fake. Anakin stood at the center of the room, caught between the man who taught him peace and the one who promised him justice. His hand was trembling as he held his lightsaber with the fury that Dooku had just unlocked. Dooku ignited his red saber, telling Qui-Gon he'd come too late to stop the future. Qui-Gon said he's sorry for what he has become. He and Obi-Wan darted forward, dueling now with Dooku. Anakin would close his eyes, and he would do what Qui-Gon always told him to do. He trusted his instincts. He thought of his mother, of Qui-Gon, and of who he wanted to build a future with. As Obi-Wan was knocked down by a blast of Force lightning, and Qui-Gon was thrown hard into a wall, Anakin flew in, swinging hard at Dooku. His relationship with Qui-Gon was too strong to turn him to the dark side so easily. Anakin had spent years in the darkness already. He didn't want to go back. Anakin swung at Dooku, and Dooku was able to fight him off, but this attack gave time for Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan to return. Dooku pushed a stab towards Qui-Gon's chest, but Obi-Wan slid in from the side, spinning his saber into a low block that redirected the blow upward. Their blades flashed together, with Anakin swinging hard overhead, Qui-Gon catching Dooku's deflection mid-swing, and Obi-Wan cutting low. Dooku's foot slipped as Anakin cut into his thigh, then used the Force to yank him off balance, and Qui-Gon seized the opening, knowing what had to be done. He stabbed his old master right through the heart. Dooku fell to the floor in horror. It broke Qui-Gon to have to do this, but he knew it was the only way. And together, the three Jedi would leave the castle, knowing this was a turning point for the galaxy. Before long, Qui-Gon would expose everything to the Council, to the Senate floor, including the discovered truth about Palpatine working with Dooku. The Republic had nearly been ruled by true evil. The Senate worked to elect a new leader, and the Council saw they were blind to all of it. When the Council finally turned to Anakin and offered him a place among the Jedi, Anakin and Qui-Gon refused. They said that the Force was leading them elsewhere, and together, Qui-Gon and Anakin would journey to the Outer Rim, finding a new order. They became the Guardians of the Living Force. Their mission was to bring balance and justice where the Republic could not. The Hutts, furious that their slave markets and spice routes were being dismantled, would strike back with assassins and mercenaries. Anakin led the defense for the people out here. Word would spread of Jedi disillusioned by the Council's politics, leaving Coruscant, following the pull of the Living Force. Masters and knights came to this new order to fight, heal, and learn of a new path. Mace Windu and Yoda, still guiding the Coruscant Jedi, chose not to stop them. Windu told the Senate that these Jedi were finally returning to what they were meant to be, protectors, not politicians. With Bail Organa as Chancellor, the Republic began to change for the better, and 10 years later, the Outer Rim would see worlds rebuilding under the protection of the Guardians of the Living Force. Anakin had become a teacher as much as a warrior. He was still fiery, headstrong, but his confidence and life experience made him a good man in the end. Qui-Gon and Shmi had married a few years earlier, and they watched over a new generation of Force users. And though Coruscant and the Republic still stood, its center no longer defined the galaxy. The Force flowed freely, and it felt truly balanced. And folks, that is our story for today. Sorry, talking for a while. Whoo! Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this one. I think I've done something in the past. I want to be honest, I don't remember all my videos. I know I did one of my favorite videos, What If Anakin Was Born in the Imperial Era? Genuinely love that video. I like this one a lot as well, so it's fun to just throw characters. It's like the time travel videos, but obviously this one doesn't have any memories of a different era. Anyways, really like this video. Let me know what you guys thought down in the comments. Let me know what you want to see next. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.